Hello, today we get to sit with Kaylee, and I really enjoyed this conversation. She tells us a little bit about her story with scrupulosity and with a faith transition. And originally, when I had entered this conversation, I thought that her scrupulosity had led to a faith transition, and I found out during our conversation that that was not necessarily the case. So we do touch on two kind of distinct aspects of Kaylee's life. One piece on this mental health, OCD, scrupulosity, and how that's impacted her worldview and her formative years, and then also on transition from faith and what that impact has been for her community and for her life as well. And so both were just so helpful for me to sit with someone that has experienced extreme feelings. Like, I didn't really understand the impact of scrupulosity and what that had on Kaylee, especially during her middle school and high school and early college years, and how I can be a more empathetic person to those that have those feelings and have OCD. I think OCD is sometimes thrown around and not seen as a big deal, but if that's something that you're navigating in your brain, it sounds like something that could be so frustrating. And so I gained a lot of empathy during this conversation. I was so grateful for Kaylee opening up and sharing so much with us, and I would have loved to keep talking, but I'm excited for you to learn from her. And with that, let's jump in.
Yeah, so I guess I will give just a little bit of background because I think that's helpful in understanding a bit of my story. I was born in Ohio, but mostly raised in Utah and have a great family. I also was raised in a very devout LDS family, or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for a lot of my life, that served me really well. It totally comprised my belief system and really just who I was, and honestly helped shape a lot of my values and my morals. And I am the oldest of 7 kids, and I went to BYU, Provo. I got a degree in finance. And I guess going into my experience with scrupulosity, it began, I have always experienced anxiety. Even as a child, a lot of times it was separation anxiety. But as I got into my early teenage years, it intensified. And around the age like 13 or 14 was when I really started to notice this really intense anxiety. A lot of these things were I guess, scrupulous thoughts, even though I didn't know it at the time. But, and it's probably helpful to understand what scrupulosity is too, which
Yeah.
is essentially OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, primarily surrounding morals or your relationship with God. And so I would have intense anxiety around being honest all the time, or if there was something that I felt like I did wrong that I needed to talk to the bishop about, then I would, but then I still wouldn't feel great afterwards. So I'd almost have to confess again. Yeah,
Interesting.
it was very intense for me. So that's when it all started. And then it ultimately got to a high my freshman year of college. So that's how I started out with scrupulosity, and just a little bit about the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back for myself, and I don't think that I really had scrupulosity, but just thinking about how things are the narrative within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and probably like any high demand religion, that just would be so heavy on a youth, I think. So I'm curious what your other feelings were around that time. Did that lead to any sort of depression or like that feelings of self-worth in any way?
Yeah. So, firstly, to comment on what you just barely said, I would also be interested in seeing how many people deal with scrupulosity and how many of those people were part of a high demand religion. I
Mhm.
feel, and of course, I don't think that was ever necessarily the goal of, oh my gosh, you're supposed to feel so bad about something here that you're endlessly guilt tripping yourself. I don't think that was ever really the narrative. There was a narrative that if you do something wrong, feel bad and change. And
Yeah.
and anyways, I think that's interesting how you're pointing that out too, because I'd be interested in seeing how many people in a high demand religion have
Y-
scrupulosity.
Yeah. Totally.
But to answer your question, yes, and that's actually what led me to getting help. My
Mm.
freshman year of college, I was dealing with so much scrupulosity OCD that it took me a couple hours to finish even like a page of reading, because I would reread
Mm.
the words to make sure that I was rereading, and understanding or trying to read everything. But the problem with OCD is that you can't just reread a sentence once. It was multiple times just to make sure that I
Oh.
was getting through it. And then when a self evaluation would happen in a class, which was like my worst fear ever, I would still grade myself as less than having completed all of my homework, because
Mm.
I just wanted to make sure that I was covering my bounds, that if I had accidentally skipped a word or misunderstood something, that I was still being honest. So I would have rather given myself a lower grade than given myself a grade that I'd actually achieved
Yeah.
and been wrong with God, essentially. So, anyways, it's a bit tricky, but yes, in short, that did lead to me feeling really depressed because I was getting bad grades, which
Oh my
is
gosh.
awful.
Yeah.
Was awful for me coming from high school and trying really hard to get A's. So, yeah, that it was really difficult for me.
Would you have put the same emphasis on, like you were saying, you grade yourself a certain way because you don't want to be wrong in the sight of God, but would you have thought the same way if it was like, I don't want to be wrong, I don't want to like in the sight of my professor or to my fellow students, or is it just tied to God?
For me at the time, it was just God. If
Okay.
I could have cared less about what other people thought about me as long as I felt like I was doing right in the sight of God.
Mm.
And to be honest, it actually led me into some pretty tricky situations where maybe I wasn't as empathetic to certain people because I felt like I needed to speak the truth, or I
Interesting.
was in a challenging friendship maybe because I was apologizing all the time about
Mm.
something that I couldn't remember if I did or did not do, just to cover the bases. So it actually affected my relationship with other people a lot. But yeah, no, as far as I was concerned, as long as I was in the sight of God, then I
It
was good.
does.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
so then
sounds
you go.
crazy, I know.
No, it actually doesn't sound that crazy to me because I have had similar feelings in school where it was like, "Oh, I skipped a paragraph in my reading. Can I still write that I read the whole thing?" You know what I mean?
Right.
I can imagine what that feels like. Obviously, I didn't feel the weight of it, but I don't think that you're crazy at all. So, and it makes me almost feel stronger for you because I remember thinking that and being like, "Okay, Whitley, you read the thing, you got out what they're intending for you to get out and move on." But for me to not be able to get out that, and because I do remember with saying, "Okay, let me go back and find the page," but to then be stuck on it sounds like it's so frustrating. So I'm feeling for you is all I'm saying. But okay, so you
Well, thank
then
you.
um go seek out help, and is this the first time, like, scrupulosity is brought that word is brought to your attention, or what was it like when you sought out help?
Yeah, it's a good question. My parents obviously knew that like things were up with me growing up,
Mm.
just with all the anxiety that I'd experienced, and they tried to put me in therapy a couple times, but I'm pretty strong-headed
Like, "No."
and was like, absolutely not. I am not
Mm.
going to go see a therapist. Nothing's wrong with me. And also, how dare you? So I look back and I'm like, oh gosh, I wish that I maybe didn't have all that strong-headedness back then. And
Mm.
so I didn't know that I had OCD until, again, I hit this breaking point freshman year. I decided to go into a counselor and I told them everything that was going on and how I would have these unwanted thoughts or feelings. And then I would just have this intense anxiety, and then I would have to do something, even if it didn't make sense, to alleviate that stress. but it was only alleviated temporarily. And then I'd get a little bit of relief, and then the same like unwanted thought or feeling would come back and it would spike that anxiety again. And my therapist said, "Oh, this sounds like OCD." And it was such a relief, honestly, for me to
Mm,
put a name to what I was experiencing and knowing that I wasn't going like absolutely crazy and that other
yeah,
people have experienced this and that maybe there was some hope for finding relief in the future.
relief.
And yeah, I'm not sure if I learned about scrupulosity in that session, but obviously learning about the diagnosis led to more research down that hole.
Interesting. Yeah, tell us more of your story after that. So you now have some words to speak, some way to address how you're feeling, and where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think therapy has been very paramount in just helping manage OCD. I actually attended like a 9-week outpatient program. And I know it sounds really intense, and it was. It was 5 or 6 hours a day, but things were just to a
Oh,
point where I had let my parents know, gosh, I need some help. It's
mm,
okay to need help. And I want to do this so that I can live a life not just in complete fear. So I think that was really helpful. We did a lot of exposure response therapy, which was somewhat helpful, but I got a lot of tools from that center that kind of helped me be able to go into a quote unquote remission of sorts. And that's
okay.
what I've seen with OCD throughout my life is that it's intense. And then sometimes I have a couple months or a good couple weeks, maybe even a
Mhm.
year where I'm not dealing with OCD as much. But unfortunately, it tends to come back. If you search it online, you'll find resources that just say that OCD is chronic. And that's something that I don't
Mm,
really want to believe and maybe something that I haven't fully accepted. But also, I think that there are a lot of things that you can do to really help manage, I guess, just that different way of thinking. If you look
yeah,
at OCD, I guess, in that way of it's just a different way that I respond to the world. And that's something that
yeah.
I get to learn how to work with.
Is there a cause for it that research shows at all?
Not that I found. There's some research that points towards it being genetic, which I do have some cousins and uncles that deal with OCD, but that is the only thing that I've seen so far.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious. First, do you see it in other, is it really easy for you to spot in other people now, especially after doing all this work for yourself?
It's interesting because OCD a lot of the time has a connotation to it that you're always cleaning your hands or like you've got a really tidy house, and it is something that you can see. But OCD for me was almost entirely internally. And
Hmm.
so from just looking at somebody else, not typically. However, when I talk to people, there have been a couple friends or people that I've talked to where I'm like, oh, that sounds like OCD.
OCD.
Um,
Yeah. I guess that's what I was wondering, especially growing up in a high demand religion, if you felt like you could, if you're looking back on high school and your friends, if you were able to say, oh, I think they were experiencing that as well. And then the other reason I asked is, is there any known cause of it? Because we're talking about OCD, but specifically also scrupulosity. If high demand religion or things that have the same attributes as high demand religion, if they e- exacerbate that or make it worse or cause it. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
huh, I'm thinking about that. And I think the thought that I do have is that OCD tends to attach to things that are really important to you.
Rude.
And so in that regard, I would think that more people in a high demand religion would tend to have more scrupulosity. But again, it would be interesting to see a study on how many people have OCD, how many of those people are in a high demand religion, and are there the same amount, is there the same percentage of people that have OCD outside of a high demand religion and inside of one, and just comparing the whole scrupulosity,
Yeah.
yeah, metrics. But I don't know. And to answer your other question, looking back at high school, I personally don't know. If I had been out of my head a little bit more, like maybe I would
Mm.
have been able to tell, but it was like a full-time job. Like almost
Wow, okay.
a minute didn't go by without me thinking about something and praying to God or doing one of
Oh
my
my
other
goodness.
devotions. So
Yeah.
I wish I had a bit
Kaylee,
of a
that's
different high school
crazy.
experience. Yeah,
I'm glad it sounds like you're in a better place and have some like ways to navigate that. Cause yeah, when
me
you put it
too.
like that,
Thank
I'm
you.
like, I feel for you.
Well,
Um,
it's okay though too. And also like we have our own things and everybody just has their own hard.
no,
So
it's so true. Yes, no, 100%. It's when someone else is hard and you have to take a step back and say, okay, let me imagine that for myself. And it's good for us to see the hard that other people do. Anyway, yeah, is there anything about scrupulosity and OCD that you wish like the people around you, your community, your family, your friends understood about it? It'd be helpful.
yeah, I think something that and I'm trying to put myself back in my shoes of when I was in the heat of scrupulosity as well. Some things that come to mind are I'm trying my best. I need support. And honestly, criticizing less and loving more
Mm,
because you're already being so hard on yourself, that it's
yeah.
really hard to take criticism from other people. And I say that, I also realize that sometimes you do need a bit of a wake up call, but OCD is just a bit of a different beast and oftentimes isn't fixed with well, just pray and you'll be forgiven and you don't have to think about it anymore. Like there's a little bit more that goes into it.
Yeah. No, I think that's huge. Okay, so some of this has led you to have a faith transition. I don't know how you or how you refer to or talk about it, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that aspect of your story and how this plays into that.
Yeah. So at the very end of my time at BYU, I got an internship out in Charleston, South Carolina, and I traveled out there. And the reason I mention this is because I think getting out of Utah and honestly, my BYU experience was great, but also getting away from I need to be sticking to this honor code
Yeah.
and was really helpful just in allowing myself to be able to explore some of these beliefs. And I actually separate some of my scrupulosity from my faith journey because I think I
Oh, okay.
probably would have gone on the faith journey either way.
Oh, okay,
But
okay. That's helpful.
yeah, no, I'm sure that, and I know that it played into it in certain parts, especially since because of the scrupulosity, I feel like I tended to be more all or nothing, black and white in the church. And I think because I was that way, yeah, just some of the things that I was approaching, some of the different questions that I was having about religion and just truth in general, or probably, or I'm trying to even think of how to say this, it was probably more intensified just because of the OCD.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, that's helpful for me to know. I had for some reason thought they were tied together, like that had led you to and I'm sure just like you said, it played into it a little bit, but it wasn't as pivotal a part of it, it sounds like.
yeah, no, it wasn't as pivotal a part because my OCD and scrupulosity, there was nothing more than what I wanted to stay in the church
Ah.
and be right in the sight of God. But when I moved out to Charleston, right before I had moved at BYU, I was really frustrated about honestly the dating scene, which I know sounds
Mm,
superficial, but I really wanted to progress in my life and kind of start a new chapter and was really excited about being a mom and just getting married. And I just remember praying about it a lot, Whitley, and I just didn't feel like I got an answer from God and had struggled a lot with receiving personal revelation, which I do think was tied to some scrupulosity of, is this me or is this like
yeah.
the spirit, which I think a lot of people have. And I was
Mhm.
really frustrated with that. And honestly, I put God in a timeout. I was like, you know what? I don't understand why I can't be progressing in this area whatsoever. I've been praying about it for a while. And yeah, I'm really frustrated. And so that was the start to putting God on the back burner for me. And then when I moved out to Charleston for an internship, I just finally allowed myself to start asking some of these questions that I'd been so scared about asking growing up. And these were, it all started with, oh, does God actually answer my prayers? But very quickly went into more questions of, is there even a God?
Yeah.
Is there good and bad? If there is a God and that holds true, and there is good and evil, is God good? Is there
Mhm.
universal truth? Just a lot of these
You were
really deep
digging deep.
questions. I
Yeah.
was digging deep. It was for anybody who's asked really deep questions and really tried to come at it from an unbiased standpoint of realizing I this could be or it could not be regardless of what I've believed before. It's like an all-consuming process again.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, I dove really deep and I gave myself permission to think and come up with my own answers even if they weren't exactly what I wanted. And yeah, that was the start of it all. I think oftentimes people come towards, or I guess start on their faith journey in a few different ways. I think like church culture is one thing that instigates that, church history, and then just like a search for truth. And mine was more of the search
Mm,
for truth and led into the others a bit as well.
okay. And so where did that journey take you?
So it's been a while. I felt like I went through, oh gosh, is it the 7 stages of grief or something? 6 stages of
I
grief?
don't know.
Yeah, the 7
That's a lot of
stages of
stages.
grief where I was like angry at first and in denial, and
Mm,
eventually came into acceptance that like I may never know truth. Like, how does one even determine truth? And
frustrating.
then the depression, acceptance, whatever order it is. And I guess now I would just say that I'm in this space where I honestly don't hold a lot of beliefs, and it's actually a really uncomfortable space for me to be in, but I don't know if I can ever know anything. And I know
Yeah.
that sounds maybe a little depressing and existential, but
Do you feel
that's
like
where
you're in
I'm
the
at.
middle of that though? You're in the middle of it, or you feel like you've come to that conclusion that like you just may never know and that's okay?
I've come to that conclusion, but I'm having a hard time accepting it because it feels very uncomfortable, and I really miss having a structured belief system, but just could never go back to that.
Yeah. But I am curious as you and this might say I don't understand OCD, but do you feel like there was any like guilt for leaving something that you felt so strongly about? Was it hard to let a feeling like that go if you had that feeling? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I felt a lot of guilt at the beginning asking the questions in the first place
Mm.
because how who was I to be questioning if God was there? What if God
Oh
really
yeah.
wasn't there, or what if they were there? And I think I felt a lot of guilt with some of my maybe experimentation. Like when I stopped wearing garments, or at least was trying it out for the summer, I think I felt a little bit of guilt around that. But I
Mm,
think, and sorry, I want to say one more thing on the whole experimentation part too. I
yeah.
actually am grateful for the opportunity to experiment and everything, be out of the Utah bubble a bit, and really just be thinking about what do I actually believe, and am I making these choices out of fear or out of love? And I realized, I think partially due to the OCD, that I was making a lot of decisions deep down out of fear.
Uh,
There was a time where I would wear my garments because I felt more connected to God, but when I was out in Charleston, it got really hot and I was going out with my
mhm.
friends and didn't want to be wearing something super long and felt some guilt for that. But when I actually got down to the root of it, I was terrified about what God would think. And then I thought to myself, but this isn't even serving its purpose of helping me feel close to God right now. I think that God will
Mm,
understand if I'm not
yeah.
wearing them. And I ultimately think that if there is a God, I would so much rather at the end of my life go up to them and say, hey, you know what? Like, these are the decisions that I've made in my life because I want to and because I love these choices or I love you, rather than coming up to
Yeah.
them at the end of my life and saying, "Oh my gosh, I was perfect, as straight as an
Yeah.
arrow," and just have be filled with all this anxiety and fear.
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
doing the
I
best
what
of
you said.
explaining this.
Oh, no, I think you're doing a wonderful job. I really loved what you said a little while ago when you said you gave yourself permission to think, because I think that's a really hard thing to do, actually. And I think it's a really brave thing to do. And I think that a lot of us need to be braver and to do that. So I actually think it's really cool. And
Well,
I
thank
would like
you.
to
I
see,
appreciate
and yeah, yeah, and I think we have to consistently and choose to do that, because otherwise we fall into just doing what other people tell us to do. So I think you're
right.
doing a great job explaining.
I'm curious
Um,
if
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say I'm curious if people don't think because they're scared of what the outcome might be or don't
Oh,
allow
for
themselves to
sure.
have certain thoughts because what if what I've believed for all of my life isn't actually true? Or what if my worst fear is something that could be true? And so it's
Yeah,
honestly just stuffing all of those feelings down, and for a lot of people I think creates a lot of anxiety or just discomfort in life because when you're
yeah,
not feeling you're thinking a lot, and yeah, you just get constipated feelings. So
yeah. No, I think no, I have heard people say they are unwilling to ask the questions because they fear what the answer may be. But I feel like I have to make myself go down those paths as well and say, what if you were wrong? What would you do if you were? What would you do if you would? I think that that's
totally.
very healthy and important thing to do. I hope people hear that and can walk with that, to give yourself permission to think. So I love that. I'm curious though, like with that, as and you're giving yourself permission to think, do you feel like, and maybe stepping away from the church, what, first off, like what was that experience like with your close relationships, friends or family that either are or are not members of the church, and the impact that had on relationships, what that was like? Because I'm curious if giving yourself permission to think gave other people permission to think, or if they shut that down and said, okay, you do you, but I'm not curious about the path that you've gone down. I'm not curious about what you've learned.
Yeah, it was a totally different experience with different people. I think with my family it was probably a bit harder because religion is something that we all related on and something that was really important to us. So it caused a lot of contention, honestly, with a
Mm,
couple of family members just early on. I think partially because for me, I was fearful, I guess, maybe, or maybe a little bit strong headed again with some of my beliefs, or, oh, why is the church this way? Or like, why don't you understand what I'm thinking? And I think that that was coming from a place of unsurety in myself and caused a lot of contention with my friends. I was fortunate enough to have some friends that were going through similar situations as me.
mm,
And that was honestly so helpful to be able to bounce some of these things off of them. And I had a really close friend out in Charleston as well who was going through a few of these things with me too.
mm.
And just, yeah, it was really helpful. As time has gone by, things have gotten a lot better with family. It's, yeah, in
Ooh,
all
that's
candidness, like, we just don't talk about religion a lot anymore. And there
yeah.
are sometimes when I'm back with family and we'll say prayer, we'll go to church, but
It's
family's been really supportive. So, yeah,
What do you think it will look like with your family?
I feel like there are a lot of good morals. I really love the familial aspect. And so there are a lot of the things in the church that I actually really still love and a lot of things that are hard. It's always going to be a part of my family's life, like born and bred
Yeah,
LDS.
yeah,
And so regardless of whether or not we want that in Jack's life, then it's going to be. I think Jacob and I, and again, I don't really mind some of that. I think that there's a lot of really great influences and a
mm,
lot of really great things to learn from people who are a part of the church. Jacob and I really want to have Jack be able to approach life just being able to have his own beliefs as well. So I
Mm,
think while we might teach some of our beliefs here and there, this is something you have to figure out for yourself. And like
yeah.
truly letting him figure these things out for himself instead of you need to figure this out, but it has to be this answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting you say that because even for me, my husband and I are similar in that it's like we believe this one thing, but I want you to be able to find out truth for yourself. So where do I find the balance of like what's the difference between indoctrination and like sharing with you what I believe? And because I want you to
Right.
find out truth for yourself anyway, I just think it's a hard thing as maybe we can transition, but yeah, I feel like that's a really tricky thing to navigate. It is like helping your children find truth and what do you tell them and what do you like guide them to find on your own. But if you're doing any guiding at all, then yeah, anyway, the loop.
I know where you're coming from. And it's tricky too, right? Because we all grow up with social like constructs in
Yeah,
one way or another. And we're all going to grow up with maybe some negative beliefs that were ingrained in us and also some positive ones. So ultimately,
yeah,
as hard as it is to hear, we can't be the perfect parent. We can just like try our
yeah.
best. And yeah, I think a lot of that just comes with letting your child, I guess, follow their heart, as silly as that sounds too, but just
Yeah.
follow their intuition honestly and what's right for them and what rings true for them, because at the end of the day, if I've learned anything about truth, like that's the only truth that you really can stick with is what feels true to you, because who
Mm,
knows, there might be a god that is similar to what people in the LDS church envision. And
mhm,
also, there might be Buddha, or
yeah.
there might be just this magnetic energy that just rules the universe. So, at the end of the day, we can't know right now.
Mm,
Um, and so, I think it's just allowing that space for everybody to have their own beliefs and
yeah,
just, yeah, coming
yeah.
to it all with compassion and curiosity, honestly.
That's insightful. What do you wish I because we're talking about the LDS Church, what do you wish specifically like members of the LDS Church knew about this part of your life? And I guess also just the community at whole, but probably specifically, what do you wish that people knew about your decision to find your own path, find truth?
I think, I guess what I'll say, what I wish people most understood is that I'm really not that different of the person than who I was when I was part of the church. And I guess I say that with a grain of salt because actually I've changed a lot, but I think I understand a lot more of what they're talking about than what they might think. I think that there's a big stigma
Mm,
too about once you leave the church, like you just don't understand or you're not the same person. And that's hard. And also, I've never really put myself in that bucket of, oh, I'm like completely out of the church. I'm more in just that space of whatever rings true. And there are some things in the church that ring true, some of the moral guides and compasses. And then there are quite a few things that don't. And that bucket's maybe increasing a little bit more. But
mm,
just like to be in no box and just
I
taking
like that.
what rings true.
Hmm. I guess I feel like a lot of the people I know that have stepped away from the church, it's like an intentional thing. I'm sure there are also people that just find themselves in a different space, but I didn't know if you felt that way at all. If it was like, I chose to do this and it wasn't an easy choice, and it's not like just out of rebellion of wanting to not do what my mom and dad tell me to do. It's, I
Right.
think you made mention of this when we were talking about it. You're like, I actually really wish that I believed that it was true. It'd make things a lot easier.
Oh gosh, yes, I do. And that's actually something I've been talking with my husband Jacob about a lot recently is just, gosh, I miss the community and gosh, I miss
Mm,
the having the structured belief system. And
uh,
yeah, it's actually been really hard, especially raising kids, just thinking about well, there's not going to be necessarily the girls' camp or the scout camp. And
mm,
there are things that I wouldn't really want my child being taught during those activities, but the community is unmatched, and
mm.
it's really hard to find that other places.
I was gonna say, do you feel like you've found community in other places?
To some extent, I think honestly, a lot of my community is still comprised of just, yeah, the friends and family that I've made from
Mm.
college, etc. But to be
Yeah,
honest, like I've actually really struggled finding community. And I think part of that has been on me and effort just because I've been working full time and a lot of my
yeah,
free time I've just spent with my husband and toddler. But I'm
yeah.
sure that you can find community outside of the LDS church. There are plenty of people that have done it.
Of
And
course.
it's a lost art in some ways too. And I think the LDS church does it really well.
That's why I'm like really passionate about is like creating community. And yeah, all the research shows we are really bad at it in the United States. And I think in the world in general, we're going that direction. And yeah, it's a lost art. It makes me sad. So I think it's still there and there's still hope. I have lots of hope. There's tons of awesome people. There's lots of awesome spaces to find and like co-create and gather as families. But yeah, it's harder and harder now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes in the future. I'm excited to create more community and also, yeah, I have a great group of friends and family that are right by me too. So I'm really grateful for that. Count myself
Good.
lucky.
The last question I want to ask you though is where have you found belonging? Or if it's not where, maybe with who? And what did that look like?
So I've been thinking about this question and a few different things came to mind. I think I find belonging with my friends and I find belonging with my family, which again, I'm really lucky to have such good friends and family. But at the end of the day, I think finding belonging with myself is one of the
Mm,
most important things and something that I am still working on. Because if you don't have belonging with yourself, how can you actually like really feel like you belong anywhere else?
yeah.
And so that, so yeah, do I feel the most belonging right now? Not necessarily, but it's something that I'm working on with myself.
I haven't thought about it in the way that it can come and go. Because a lot of people say that same thing, and that's something that I've learned that's been surprising to me in all of these like conversations is that belonging is with yourself. But to think about it in a sense that it can come and go is interesting. It's something that we have to like work on
Yeah,
as we
I mean,
change.
totally. Because sometimes there are new things that accept about yourself, or
Yeah.
it's just a relationship that you have to constantly nurture. So if you neglect yourself for a while there, it's just something you have to rebuild. And so I'm in that process.
Yeah, or even if you like give yourself permission to think and you change your mind about something, you change your opinion, you change your stance about something, and then finding space for yourself to accept yourself with that, like truly actually accepting and believing something different. And not just in regards to like religion, but just in general, I actually think that can be a hard thing to do. Like, I believe this now. I think this is whatever. And then to give yourself that space to accept, I think that's hard. I think that's something I navigate for myself frequently, actually. So it's
Huh.
interesting that you share that.
I'd be more interested about hearing about that later.
Yeah, I'd
Some
love to
other
share it
time.
with you. I'm not at the end of it, I don't think, but I think that made me realize some the ways that I'm thinking right now that I need to give myself space for. But anyway, anything else that you want to share with people? You have a few people that are listening. I'm just kidding. Okay, there are like 100 people that listen to this podcast probably rigorously. But what would you
That's
share with like your
awesome, Whitley. That's
oh, we're
seriously
still so
awesome, and I
few.
love what you're building here.
You're so sweet.
Um,
But yeah, anything else that you have an audience of people that are coming from a Utah community? Is there anything that you would love to share in regards to this community and hearing people and having empathy for someone different than you? Because your wealth of knowledge.
I think just coming to other people and listening to their story, and this goes for all of us, just all of us exercising a little bit more compassion and curiosity and acceptance for other people's experiences. And I think, yeah, curiosity can do us all a lot of good.
Yeah, curiosity is powerful. I love that. You're wonderful. It's been so fun to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Whitley.